know that one of the frustrating things for you is that the doctors and the therapists, they couldn't give you a clear prognosis, and nor were they very helpful. Could you comment on that?
Yeah. Now, don't get us wrong. We don't mean to bash all doctors and therapists, but quite honestly, we were frustrated. I was very frustrated and even depressed. Um, we had some great doctors. My personal GP is a cool guy. He's a Christian guy. I like him a lot. Um, One of the therapists we had was tremendously encouraging, but some were not very encouraging. In fact, honestly, we came back, and my wife can attest to it. My poor wife, I put her through a lot. I would get angry, get depressed, until finally, my wife got sick of it, and she says, don't go. I mean, every time you go, you come back so discouraged. Don't go. It was especially frustrating because what I felt was that the therapists, they get judged upon progress. If you make too much progress, they lose work because you don't need them. If you make too little progress, they pull you, because they're not doing any good. So they would push me to try to do things that were way beyond me in the beginning stages. It was just, what's the word? Tremendously disheartening. Yeah. Just takes all the wind out of your sails because there's just no possible way um, that I could do what they were asking me to do at that time. At that time.
One of your main goals in going to therapy, the insurance covered therapy, was that you wanted to be able to play piano and to sing again.
Yes.
But that was an extreme challenge to get the help that you needed to get there.
Yeah. Uh, I'm glad you brought that up. Um, Piano was out of the question. I mean, they asked me at the rehab center, "What's your goal?" My goal, I said I want to play piano again, and the therapist straight up told me, "Oh no, Mr. Leung, you'll never play piano again," and that was not helpful. I mean, I'm sure she was trying to be honest and help me by facing reality. But, I spoke to another therapist and he said, "Oh, I never tell people that." And I said, "Why not?" Because who am I to place a limit on what you can do? And I found comfort in that. Why would I willingly and knowingly put a limitation upon myself? With God, nothing is impossible, right? We know that. We remember the words of Paul: "I can do all things through God who strengthens me." And so, bottom line, what that means is no, I can't fly, but anything that God calls us to do, no matter what obstacle, no matter what challenge, no matter what difficulty lies ahead, if God has put us in that situation, He will give us the power and the discipline and the inspiration and whatever else we need to get over, under, through. We'll get through this. And I appreciated what that therapist said. He said, "Who am I to put a limitation on what you can do?"
Yeah, he was one therapist that was out of the ordinary. But one of the therapists said, the most that you can hope for is that you could walk without a limp. And I know that that was a very, very, very depressing thing that you had to go through. And you were very frustrated about it. And especially since you didn't know what to expect. And people would often tell you that every patient is different, progress is different from person to person. But knowing that, can you tell everyone how you did not give up and how you got through those moments of deep depression and discouragement?
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. I was so mad. wow, I came in saying, hey, I want to play piano, I want to sing. And basically they said, we're not going to pay for it. And I was enraged because I knew that there were therapists that would specialize in vocal training. They specialized in helping singers, professional singers, sing again after an accident or a stroke. So I knew they existed. And my insurance refused to pay for any of it. They refused to play with anybody else. I mean, it's enraged. We got to get out of this. They would not tolerate, they would not have anything to do with it. They said, we have therapists, we have doctors, and that's it, Mr. Leung. You know, we don't do that. And they did not have the expertise to help me out. I tried a number of them, and they were smug and condescending, and quite frankly, they did not know as much as I felt as a beginning voice student. And I was like, how dare you? You don't know what you're talking about. I didn't say that in front of their face. You know, I was raised to be a respectful little Chinese boy. And so I wouldn't say that to their face, but oh, that's what I thought. Basically, they said, Tim, you speak well enough. You have some struggles. I can understand you. If I were to speak with you over the phone, I can understand what you're saying. That's it. We don't have anything else for you. And I'm like, I used to sing for a living. I want to get back there. And they offered me zero. And yeah, that was the encouragement they would give me. Oh, well, if you work hard enough, Mr. Leung, maybe someday you may be able to walk without a limp. And I was like, I don't want to say a bad word, but you know, I was like, forget you. I don't need to come and have you yell at me for that. So I knew God could do way better than walking without a limp.
So what was your mindset to get through that? It sounded like it was just a very lonely time. You didn't really have much support from the therapist. You couldn't get what you needed. What did you do? How did God get you through that?
Well, I wish I could say God has totally got me through that. I can run a marathon. I can. I still limp when I get tired. I still struggle, but God showed me a different way of seeing life, a different way of measuring progress, of measuring success. One of the things that God is trying to teach me is think about improving what I've got. I've lost tremendous ability. I've lost many things, and I may or may not ever enjoy them again on this earth. But I've had to think about, okay, my progress doesn't have to end. They say, oh, most progress happens, you know, in the first 3 months, in the first 6 months. And then they made it think like, if I don't push myself in the first 3 months, 6 months, you know, that's it. But no. In stroke recovery, neurogenesis, or maybe more accurately, neuroregenesis, is crucial. In other words, the brain has to heal. And if the brain heals, then the brain can fix what's broken or establish new routes to achieve the same action. So one of the things that I had to come to peace with was that it's gonna take time. So first of all, I had to give my brain fuel. I had to start eating brain healthy foods to encourage my brain to heal as fast and as thorough as it could. Take things a step at a time and to be patient. Be patient with myself. And I spoke with a young man who had experienced a stroke a couple of years before that. And he said, celebrate the little victories. And that was important. That was important to celebrate what I could do and to redefine, as it were, redefine my measure of success.
How did you redefine success?
Okay, well, let me give you a for instance. Early on, I couldn't walk. You had to push me in a wheelchair, right? Now, my wife got real strong, hauling that wheelchair around, putting it in and out of the trunk, pushing me, and the kids. Oftentimes the kids would want to ride along too. And my wife had to push all of us. But I had to learn to get out of the wheelchair. They gave me what was called a hemi walker, and that was a modified walker where I could stumble along and walk, shuffle along one-handed. We would bring the wheelchair and you'd push me in the wheelchair, and then when we found a nice level piece of ground where we could walk, I could walk, you'd put the brakes on my wheelchair and I'd push myself up and I'd start to walk with that hemi walker. Honey, you remember the first summer after the stroke, it was terribly hot. We needed a place for me to practice my therapy, right? My therapy. And we went to an old mall, a mall that had seen its glory days in years past. And so we chose that mall because it had air conditioning, but it had very few people. And it had a large play area for the children. And so that met our needs perfectly. And I'd wheel myself where it was away from people, and I'd set the brakes. And of course, wheeling yourself in a wheelchair is very difficult if you've only got one arm. You got to remember, at that time, I wasn't like some kind of, para-Olympian, I could use two hands. My left hand was dead. It was a piece of meat. It hung there. In fact, my friend warned me about this. He said, Tim, be careful, watch your fingers. Because when your left hand drops, you could get your fingers caught in the spokes of your wheelchair. And sure enough, that's what happened. It was so dead, so lifeless, that I didn't even feel it when the fingers got caught in my wheels. And I'd set the brake and I'd try to push myself up and walk with that hemi walker. And every day when we went to the mall, I'd try to walk a little farther and a little farther and a little farther. And sometimes if I was very courageous, I'd abandon my hemi walker. It was scary because my acupuncturist at the time, he said, don't fall. Whatever you do, don't fall. Don't break anything, don't fall. And I fell a couple times. Fortunately, once I fell on the carpet, once I fell on the grass. It took all my effort and mental concentration, telling myself, don't fall, don't fall. And just trying to walk a little bit farther every day. And then gradually, God gave me a little more. Not daily. I wish I could say every day I improved. It was a 3-step forward, 2-step back kind of thing. And I get really excited one day, and then the next day I'd pay for it. I'd pay for it big time. I'd spend the whole day just out of commission and in pain.
Yeah, I know that you were very frustrated at the slow pace of your recovery. And I know that sometimes that became very discouraging to you. Um, I know that you went through some very tough, personally depressed times. When things were at their worst, where did you find your inspiration?
And I think three ways. Number one, God encouraged me to look for new areas of meaning and service. So again, I had to redefine my measure of success. Before, I would measure my success in, oh, how many hundreds of people would show up for service. At that time, we were going through a really tough time with a tiny little dying church. And I would measure success on, oh, we normally have an attendance of 15, 18, people. And then, oh, we have a big Christmas party and we pack the house with 60 people. Oh, that's success. And we go from, 18 to 60, right? And I would measure my success that way. I had to let that go. And so I found new ways to be meaningful and purposeful and successful. One little way is I followed my wife. She was children's director of the church, and I remember one time I helped her with her little classroom, and oh, that was a wonderful time. And there was about 8 kids, just 8 little boys. Was there a girl? I can't remember. Maybe one girl, and I led them in a song. I think it was "What a Mighty God We Serve," and we were fortunate enough that someone came out with a video of that song with a little dancing robot, and and it was cute, and the kids loved it, and that was the only way I could lead worship because my voice was so bad and I couldn't play the keyboard piano anymore. And we played the video, and oh, the kids loved it. I could talk, and so I spurred them on to sing, and it was wonderful. Their little voices were so loud, and they were just at the top of their lungs singing, "What a mighty God we serve. What a mighty God we serve." Before before the stroke and before COVID, we'd have great parties and outreach activities such as barbecues and potlucks and hot pot parties. We'd make boba and put out these big spreads and invite youth and children, and we'd have all these things, and I'd measure my success that way. But afterwards, I couldn't even make meals for the elderly. And we couldn't do that anymore, especially with COVID. I found joy in making grilled cheese for my little girl. Our kids are little, and they're picky eaters, right? A lot of you parents out there, And my girl would not eat protein. Once in a while, she'd eat a hot dog. She would not eat protein, and I'd got into organic eggs, and eggs were supposed to be so healthy for you, and I wanted to get egg into my girl's diet, but she would refuse. We consulted books, and they said, well, just make whatever, and if they don't eat it, send them to bed hungry. And I admit I was not tough enough to do that. We had to figure out a way. And so my girl loved cheese, and she loved carbs, and so she would eat grilled cheese. What I discovered is that I could beat an egg and pour it into the bread, and kind of almost like a French toast, and it would make the bread creamy and soft and eggy and delicious, but the outside would still be crunchy and buttery. And then I put a lot of cheese in the middle, and then I slipped ham. We went, right? Remember, we bought ham. We shaved it super thin, and then we slipped ham in her grilled cheese. And so now she won't eat it any other way. She calls it daddy style, and she wants her grilled cheese with ham and egg and stuff like that. We would make our own. Remember, honey, we would make our own pizza sauce, and we would put vegetables in the pizza sauce and whole wheat. Make whole wheat pizza at home, and it's a lot of extra work, but it's a lot healthier. And so we slip pumpkin and zucchini, yellow squash into the tomato sauce and make our own pizza. And I began to find joy in doing little things like that. Redefining success.
Yeah, you mentioned that there are three things where you
Yes.
found inspiration. So one was redefining success. Second, me and the kids. And then what was the third?
Thank you for reminding me. Second thing was my wife and kids. So every time I went to the hospital, they would have me fill out a questionnaire. And one of the questions was, do you ever think that your loved ones would be better off without you? Maybe I was never completely honest on the questionnaire, but I would struggle with that question. Would my family be better off without me? And God showed me, and my wife reminded me, the answer was no. They needed me. And I would look at how tired my wife was and how out of control sometimes the kids would get. My wife grew up as what they say, 乖孩子. She's a good kid. She's always been a good kid. And so when these Leung kids, would get crazy, she wouldn't know what to do because she's never experienced it before. I, however, grew up that way. And so, yeah, my kids needed me for discipline. My kids needed me. I would look in their faces. Sometimes when they were asleep, I look at their faces and I knew I couldn't give up. I had to press on. I had to get better. So that was a huge source of inspiration and motivation. I could not give up. I could not remain as helpless and hopeless and handicapped as I was. I had no choice. You see, I was an old dad, so my kids were still very little, and so they needed a dad. I'll be honest with you, if I was 70 something instead of 50 something, I think I would have given up. I wouldn't have the energy, the motivation, the inspiration, the will to get better. But it was looking in the faces of my children that I was thinking, they need a daddy. They need a strong daddy. They need a daddy who loves Jesus. They need a daddy who teaches them to refuse to give up. And so I knew I couldn't stay the way that I was, that I had to get better. And that kept me going.
We're a Christian family. Was there any particular scriptural truth that kept you going?
Very early on, I asked my wife to help me by putting some healing verses, putting some promises of God on my hospital room wall. And she did that, and they got me through. in the early days of the stroke, I was in such great pain. It's not just paralysis, but, the whole side of my body was like in one cramp. And it was awful. The pain was just inexpressible. Oftentimes, painful conditions would compound themselves. One time I had a cramp from my left armpit all the way down to my hip. My Achilles heel would just fire in spasms. And then I had severe constipation. The worst constipation I've ever had in my life. I just could not go, 2-3 days. And at the same time, I had gout. I had gout in my other toe. And so there I was with gout and muscle spasms and cramps and paralysis and numbness and constipation all at the same time. And so my wife put up these promises of God, and those things got me through. Let me share with you, a couple of them. Jeremiah 30:17 says, "But I will restore you to health and heal your wounds, declares the Lord, because you are called an outcast." And we felt like outcasts. We were going through the darkest time. We felt alone, and that nobody liked us, nobody was helping us, and people were talking behind our backs, and that verse, "I will restore you to health and heal your wounds because you are called an outcast," it brought me great comfort. And then also Psalm 103 verses 2-5 brought me great comfort, and I claim that as a promise of God. It talks about praising God for all his benefits, who forgives all your sins and heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit, crowns you with love and compassion, and even satisfies the desires of your heart so that your youth is renewed like the eagles. And that, I clung on to that with everything I had. And it was promises like that that got me through.
We need to pause your voice.
Okay. Pause for potty break. My boy needs the toilet and his mommy.